This is sleep through lifetimes. Each night, we let the current of time carry us, while the mind drifts lightly across the surface of memory. No need to analyze or focus, just let everything unfold as it is. Before we set off, I don't need likes or subscribes. I only hope that if you drift off midway, your sleep will be calm and your heart as light as a leaf. All right, let's allow the road ahead to tell the rest. The temple teaches you that listening is more than hearing. It is watching, reading, predicting. To survive, you master the subtle art of becoming invisible. You sense tension in the way robes rustle, in how quickly footsteps strike the floor. You know when a priest is in a foul mood just by the weight of the air he carries through the corridor. It becomes your specialty. Disappearing before you're noticed, completing a task before it's asked. You are praised in the quietest way possible by being left alone. And in this space, a strange kind of power grows. The less you say, the more you seem to understand. It becomes easy to imagine that silence is a gift, maybe even a strength. When others speak in hushed tones of who will be chosen to serve in the inner gardens, or who dropped a plate and was sent to the grain stores, you already know. Not because anyone told you, but because you've been watching. Patterns, reactions, whispered corrections. Every breath around you carries meaning if you care enough to listen. By the time you're old enough to scrub floors without help, you've developed an unspoken language with your surroundings. A guard twitches his fingers. He's about to dismiss you. A kitchen helper touches her wrist. She needs more water. You pick up on rhythms like a dancer learning by feel, not instruction. And yet, for all your attunement, there's a loneliness that hums under your ribs. A quiet knowing that while you've become excellent at being overlooked, you don't know what it means to be truly seen. In moments when no one is near, you whisper words under your breath just to feel them pass your lips, names of gods, fragments of prayers. You don't know what half of them mean, but the shape of the sounds feels good in your mouth. It's like tasting forbidden fruit that no one notices you pluck. One night, while collecting dried lemons near the western wall, you pass a row of statues, each carved with eyes so wide they seem to watch even in darkness. The wind shifts, and you swear you hear something. Your name, maybe, or a memory not yet made. You turn to look, but nothing's there. Just the scent of myrrh and the rustle of distant chanting. You sleep lightly that night, haunted not by nightmares, but by the weight of things you'll never be allowed to say. There's a theory in modern psychology that suppressed thoughts don't disappear. They burrow. They lodge in the soft tissue between heartbeats, making it harder to breathe when no one's watching. But back then, in the middle of your temple days, you just thought you were tired. Tired of scrubbing, tired of nodding, tired of all the unsaid things pressing against the inside of your chest. It's around this time that a new scrollkeeper arrives. He is older, with ink-stained hands and a sharp voice that slices through silence like papyrus through air. Unlike the others, he doesn't ignore you. He doesn't acknowledge you either, not directly, but his eyes linger a second longer when you deliver his water. His parchment is always arranged just so, and when you sweep, he lets you pause. Once, he even leaves his ink out uncapped, a small, silent invitation. You begin lingering a little longer each night, never crossing the threshold, but sweeping slower, arranging bowls more neatly. One night, he murmurs to no one in particular, "The gods waste no ink on empty ears." You freeze, unsure whether to bow or flee. But he doesn't look at you again. You carry the phrase in your mind for days, turning it over like a smooth stone. The gods waste no ink on empty ears. Were your ears not empty? Was this praise? That winter, the nights stretch long. In those hours, the temple quiets into a different kind of silence, one less like fear, more like sleep. You begin stealing moments in the corridor, memorizing the way the scribes hum to themselves, the rhythm of their brushes. You begin to understand what the glyphs mean. Not just their shapes, but their stories. The difference between a crown and a serpent is just one curve of ink. The difference between a blessing and a curse is one breath out of place. And slowly, it becomes unbearable not to speak. The silence that once felt like armor now feels like a sealed jar, filling drip by drip, ready to crack. You start dreaming of words, not spoken, but floating in the air like dust in candlelight. And in those dreams, you are not a servant, you are a voice. It begins with a whisper, not your own, but the soft shuffle of sandals against limestone. You're kneeling, wiping down the corner near the scriptorium door. When the sound approaches, you know the cadence of most people here. This is different, slower, not out of age, but observation. You don't look up until you smell something unusual, not incense, not oil, but jasmine. Faint, like a memory. And then she speaks not to you but aloud. This corridor breathes differently at night. The voice is calm, rich, a woman's, confident yet unrushed. You keep your head bowed. You've been taught not to engage, especially with visiting priestesses. But something about the way she speaks, almost like she's thinking out loud, makes it feel safe. That evening, after she disappears into the inner chambers, the scrollkeeper calls you by a name he shouldn't know. Not your temple name, the one they gave you when you arrived, but your birth name. The one your mother whispered when feeding you goat's milk on cold mornings, long before she stopped appearing at roll call. You have ears for ink, he mutters, brushing past you. It's all he says, but it unspools something inside. From that night on, he allows you to stand at the corner of the scriptorium after sunset, broom in hand, feigning duty. He says nothing when you linger too long. Nothing when your gaze follows the brush as it glides over parchment. He lets your silence become part of the room. Some nights you see the priestess again. She never speaks to you directly, but she begins to leave scroll ends stacked where you sweep. Fragments with incomplete glyphs, faded words. You read them in secret under your blanket, tracing the symbols with your finger until your skin remembers them. One fragment reads, "The tongue is a bridge and a blade." You memorize it without trying. Weeks pass. One evening, a scroll slips and falls to the floor. Before you can think, you rush forward, catching it just before it touches the ground. You return it, hands low, eyes down. The scrollkeeper nods once, almost imperceptibly. And that night, when he finishes his transcription, he leaves a blank piece of parchment at the edge of the table. No words, just space. You dare not touch it. But the implication is clear. If your hands ever learned to write, what would they say? Modern-day educators might call this a gifted child moment. But back then, it was just hunger. Not for praise, not for status, but for expression. A craving to transfer what swirled inside you into something outside yourself. A secret map of thought. On a quiet morning, the priestess finally speaks directly. She sees you smoothing the stone floor and says, "Some thoughts are not meant for prayer. They're meant for parchment." You blink. She walks away. You carve her words into your mind. Then, one evening, you're left alone in the scriptorium while the scrollkeeper tends to a ritual. It's not unheard of. Your reliability has earned you the rarest reward in temple life, unspoken trust. A brazier crackles in the corner. A half-finished scroll lies on the table. The ink is still wet, and beside it, the blank parchment again. This time you sit. Your heart hammers, not out of fear, but reverence. You take the brush like it's a branch from the tree of life, and you begin to copy a line from memory. Slowly, awkwardly, but the symbols begin to form. You don't realize the priestess is watching until you reach the end of the line. "You were never taught," she says quietly. You flinch. "I'm sorry." She doesn't scold. Instead, she walks over and studies the writing. "You shouldn't have done this," she murmurs, "but you did it well." That night, she brings you a palm-sized wax tablet disguised among her robes. "Practice here," she says. Silently, you do, for weeks. Each night, while others sleep, you trace lines into the wax until your fingers ache. Your hands grow steadier, your eyes sharper. You begin to notice that writing is rhythm, breath, architecture. And in those lines, you hear yourself, your unspoken voice taking shape. Sometimes you write only fragments. "I am here. I remember the stars." Silence is louder when shared. One night, the priestess says, almost absent-mindedly, "You'll never be allowed to speak aloud in council." But written words can echo longer than voices. You ask, timidly, why she's helping you. She smiles, but not kindly, because someone helped me once, and I betrayed them by staying silent. She never explains, but you understand. There are wounds that time turns into lessons, and others it buries like bones. The scriptorium becomes your heaven. You still clean, still sweep, still stay quiet. But now, your silence has shape. Your silence carries meaning. Your silence, at last, begins to speak. The temple shifts with the seasons, but you've stopped noticing the changes. The sun rises and sets in the same arc. The shadows fall in the same corners. Only your inner world moves now, filled with lines and symbols that you can't share with anyone except the wax tablet hidden beneath your bedding. The priestess visits less frequently, but her presence lingers. She has left you with something rarer than protection: permission. Not spoken aloud, but clear in her silence. Keep going. You begin to assist the scroll keeper unofficially. He never says it aloud, but sometimes he forgets to lock the cabinet of unfinished texts. Other times, he leaves brushes unsorted, allowing you to organize them just right. It's a dance. No steps spoken, but both of you know the rhythm. Still, you never speak of it to anyone. You become two people, the quiet servant by day, the silent scribe by night. If anyone suspects, they say nothing. Perhaps your silence protects them too. One afternoon, the scroll keeper collapses. You are the one who finds him, ink pooled beneath his fingertips like spilled shadow. He survives, but barely. The head priest declares he must rest, and a new scribe is brought in, a younger man, sharp in posture, dull in spirit. He brings his own ink, and with it, suspicion. He doesn't like you. You feel it in how he watches you sweep, how he counts the brushes before and after you pass. Once, he asks what your task is in that room. You answer with the safest lie you know. I collect water jars left behind. He narrows his eyes. From this room. You shrug. Some forgetful priests leave them. That night, you don't return. But the pull is unbearable. 3 days later, you sneak back in during a sandstorm. Everyone's distracted, rituals postponed. You find the parchment with a copied hymn left unfinished. Something's wrong in the lines. One symbol, reversed. A single curve that changes meaning entirely from offering to banishment. You hesitate. Your hands sweat. Your thoughts race. Should you correct it? You know the risk. If someone finds your writing, your copying, your interference, it would be interpreted not as helpful, but as heresy. You were never meant to know these things, let alone touch them. But the mistake, it would affect the entire purification ritual. They'll recite it tomorrow, in front of the Pharaoh's sister. The parchment stares back at you. The ink is dry. It's not your place. It's not your right. But if they read it as it is, someone will be blamed. A servant, maybe the cook, maybe someone else from the outer quarters who never saw a scroll in their life. You grip the edge of the table. Your heart slams against your ribs. The silence you've worn like a second skin begins to crack. You reach for the stylus, but just before it touches the margin, a shadow falls across your hand. The new scribe, watching, he says nothing. He doesn't need to. You drop the stylus, back away, hands shaking. The next day, during the ritual, the hymn is read exactly as written. The high priest frowns. Whispers rise. A novice is punished for the error, slapped, shamed, reassigned. He weeps behind the altar. No one defends him. You say nothing. But the priestess finds you later in the garden where you now shovel incense ash. She doesn't scold. She doesn't even ask. She just says, "Sometimes silence saves no one." You don't reply. You just look away. That night, you return to your wax tablet. You write over and over, "I was afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid." Eventually, you change it, "I am afraid." Fear doesn't need permission. It grows in the absence of it. It's funny, if you asked someone today why they avoid speaking up, they might say they're shy, introverted, uncertain. But what they often mean is, "Once, I spoke up and it cost me," or "I watched someone else pay the price." That was you. That's still you. And even though the scroll keeper never returned. And the priestess eventually disappeared without a farewell. Your voice, quiet as it was, never stopped echoing inside your ribs. It just needed somewhere safe to land. But safety was never promised in that temple. Only obedience. And now, obedience has carved a hollow place inside you. One you carry like a sealed jar, growing heavier with each year. The temple shifts with the seasons, but you've stopped noticing the changes. The sun rises and sets in the same arc. The shadows fall in the same corners. Only your inner world moves now, filled with lines and symbols that you can't share with anyone except the wax tablet hidden beneath your bedding. The priestess visits less frequently, but her presence lingers. She has left you with something rarer than protection, permission. Not spoken aloud, but clear in her silence, keep going. You begin to assist the scroll keeper unofficially. He never says it aloud, but sometimes he forgets to lock the cabinet of unfinished texts. Other times, he leaves brushes unsorted, allowing you to organize them just right. It's a dance. No steps spoken, but both of you know the rhythm. Still, you never speak of it to anyone. You become two people, the quiet servant by day, the silent scribe by night. If anyone suspects, they say nothing. Perhaps your silence protects them too. One afternoon, the scroll keeper collapses. You are the one who finds him, ink pooled beneath his fingertips like spilled shadow. He survives, but barely. The head priest declares he must rest, and a new scribe is brought in. A younger man, sharp in posture, dull in spirit. He brings his own ink, and with it, suspicion. He doesn't like you. You feel it in how he watches you sweep, how he counts the brushes before and after you pass. Once, He asks what your task is in that room. You answer with the safest lie you know. I collect water jars left behind. He narrows his eyes. From this room, you shrug. Some forgetful priests leave them. That night, you don't return. But the pull is unbearable. 3 days later, you sneak back in during a sandstorm. Everyone's distracted, rituals postponed. You find the parchment with a copied hymn left unfinished. Something's wrong in the lines. One symbol, reversed. A single curve that changes meaning entirely, from offering to banishment. You hesitate. Your hands sweat. Your thoughts race. Should you correct it? You know the risk. If someone finds your writing, your copying, your interference, it would be interpreted not as helpful, but as heresy. You were never meant to know these things, let alone touch them. But the mistake, it would affect the entire purification ritual. They'll recite it tomorrow, in front of the Pharaoh's sister. The parchment stares back at you. The ink is dry. It's not your place. It's not your right. But if they read it as it is, someone will be blamed. A servant, maybe the cook, maybe someone else from the outer quarters who never saw a scroll in their life. You grip the edge of the table. Your heart slams against your ribs. The silence you've worn like a second skin begins to crack. You reach for the stylus, but just before it touches the margin, a shadow falls across your hand. The new scribe, watching, he says nothing. He doesn't need to. You drop the stylus, back away, hands shaking. The next day, during the ritual, the hymn is read exactly as written. The high priest frowns. Whispers rise. A novice is punished for the error, slapped, shamed, reassigned. He weeps behind the altar. No one defends him. You say nothing, but the priestess finds you later, in the garden where you now shovel incense ash. She doesn't scold. She doesn't even ask. She just says, sometimes silence saves no one. You don't reply. You just look away. That night, you return to your wax tablet. You write over and over, I was afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid. Eventually, you change it, I am afraid. Fear doesn't need permission. It grows in the absence of it. It's funny. If you asked someone today why they avoid speaking up, they might say they're shy, introverted, uncertain, but what they often mean is once, I spoke up and it cost me, or I watched someone else pay the price. That was you. That's still you. And even though the scrollkeeper never returned, and the priestess eventually disappeared without a farewell, your voice, quiet as it was, never stopped echoing inside your ribs. It just needed somewhere safe to land. But safety was never promised in that temple. Only obedience. And now obedience has carved a hollow place inside you. One you carry like a sealed jar, growing heavier with each year. It happens on a morning when the air feels thicker than usual, heavy with the scent of crushed papyrus and distant thunder. You're called to clean the outer scriptorium. An assignment you haven't received in moons. Your heart knocks in your chest as you approach. It's the same corridor, the same stone threshold, but the energy has shifted. Inside, the new scribe is hunched over a scroll. You can feel his eyes flick toward you as you sweep. You keep your movements small, safe. You don't look at the desk. But then he speaks. "There's a mistake," he says. You pause. A breath hangs between you like a thread. He holds up the scroll from the purification ritual, the same one you almost corrected. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asks, not accusing, but curious, like someone poking a lizard to see if it will run or bite. You nod, barely. "Why didn't you say anything?" Your throat tightens. No answer comes, not even in your mind. There's only the memory of the punished novice, the echo of the priestess's words. Sometimes silence saves no one. The scribe studies your silence like it's another glyph. He nods slowly. Then, almost offendedly, he says, "You're not allowed in here anymore." That evening, your duties change. No more corridors, no more parchment. You're reassigned to the livestock pens, where flies rule and goats scream, and no one speaks of gods. You scrub troughs. You shovel waste. The smell clings to your hair, your hands, your soul. A boy throws a date pit at you and laughs when it sticks. You don't even flinch. This, you think, is the cost of a half-spoken truth. You spend your breaks staring at the temple walls. From this far out, the columns look like silent sentinels. The carvings that once intrigued you now feel mocking. Stories told by the powerful, repeated forever, while those who dared to speak the truth were erased. Still, the habit remains. At night, you trace letters into the dirt. Nothing sacred, just pieces of you. Fragments of thoughts, memories, questions. You've begun to talk to yourself silently again. A habit you thought you'd left behind in childhood. One day, while cleaning near the outer garden wall, you hear a laugh, a child's laugh. Not cruel, but light like a bell. You look up and see a young girl watching you from the upper ledge, swinging her feet, her eyes curious. "You don't talk," she says. "I've never heard you talk." You shrug. She leans in. "I think you talk in your head." You smile, despite yourself. She grins wider and throws down a fig. It lands in your lap. Ripe, perfect, a burst of sweetness in a bitter world. After that, she returns often. She never tells you her name, you never ask. She just watches you work. Sometimes humming songs you've never heard, other times repeating things she's overheard inside the temple. "Did you know?" she says once. "There's a scroll with everyone's name on it, even if no one says it out loud." You nod, but inside something softens. Perhaps it's just the fantasy of being recorded somewhere, even in secret. Eventually, she stops coming. You don't ask why. Everything leaves eventually. Modern thinkers might call this a defense mechanism. The way you stop expecting anything good to last. But back then, it was simply how life worked. Temple servants were replaced. Priestesses moved. Scrolls burned. And the unheard were forgotten. Except you kept writing, not on wax, not with ink, but in the grooves of your memory. You began composing letters you'd never send. Words to the gods, to the girl on the ledge, to the scroll keeper, to the priestess. In your mind, you asked, if the truth isn't spoken, does it still exist? You wondered what it would take to be brave again, to speak, to write, to risk being known. But each time you imagined it, you felt your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth. The memory of exile clamped down on your chest like a stone slab. So you stayed silent. Yet the silence had changed. It was no longer hollow. It echoed with words you wished you had said, not regrets, but seeds. And even as your days dulled into repetition, your inner voice grew sharper, quieter, yes, but no longer afraid. There's a saying now that sometimes, when people stop talking, it's not because they have nothing to say. It's because they've learned no one listens. But in your case, the opposite was true. You stopped talking because your truth was too sacred to be wasted on ears that weren't ready. The seasons pass unnoticed. Your hands grow rough. Your hair, once tied with care, now mats in the corners of long days. In the temple hierarchy, you are a shadow, present, functional, forgettable. You scrub, carry, feed, bow. The temple still stands, but for you, its meaning has dulled into stone. But silence has a strange way of transforming. What began as fear calcifies into habit, and habit slowly erodes into identity. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who used to write, used to dream, used to be noticed. You become the one who moves quietly through goat pens and storage rooms, who flinches at nothing and nods at everything, until one day, the high priest himself walks into the outer corridor. He does not know your name. He does not look at you, but he is angry. A scroll has been stolen, one of the older hymns, rare and hand-copied. It had been moved during a recent storm for preservation, and now it's missing. An insult, he thunders. An offense to Ma'at herself. A small group is gathered and questioned. Not you. No one thinks to include you. You're not a suspect. You're not even considered aware enough to know which scroll was missing. But you do know. You saw it days ago, folded clumsily, half unrolled in the corner of the old pantry where broken ritual fans were stored. You had gone to fetch a stool. You had seen it resting there like an accident. And you said nothing, because they trained you well, and because no one had asked. Later, when a young boy is whipped for suspicion, someone too clever for his age, who asked too many questions about the scribes, you feel nothing, no guilt, just an odd detachment, like watching rain hit someone else's roof. That night, you lie awake, not from shame, but from a slow, knowing realization You have become the silence that once wounded you. You think back to the priestess, to her hands placing the wax tablet in yours. You think back to the girl on the ledge. You think back to the first moment you understood a glyph not as a symbol, but as a door. You wonder how many doors you've closed simply by staying quiet. You begin to write again, not with tools, but with your memory, composing letters in your mind, shaping them carefully as if carving them into stone. You write to the gods. You write to the novice who was blamed. You write to yourself. One evening, while stacking woven mats, you hear two younger servants talking. Why don't you ever speak up? One asks the other. The second shrugs. No one hears you unless they already decided to. You pause. Hidden behind the column, you want to say, "That's not true." You want to say, "I used to believe that too." You want to say something, but you say nothing. Instead, you listen, and you feel something shift, not outside, not in the temple, in you. You start collecting broken clay pots during your duties. Fragments tossed near the waste pile, pieces with smooth backs and jagged edges. You clean them, dry them, scratch tiny marks into them with a stone edge. Not full glyphs, just feelings. Shapes that mean something only to you. You keep them hidden under your bed mat, your little archive of unspoken things. One day, a rat chews through the sack holding them. A fragment slips into plain sight. A visiting acolyte finds it and brings it to a senior priest. He holds it up. Who did this? No one answers. He turns to the nearest group of servants. You're among them. Speak, he commands. Silence. You don't step forward, but for the first time in years, you want to. Later that night, the fragment is tossed away. Meaningless, they said. Just scratches. Child's play. But you retrieve it. You sit in the dark with it on your lap. The marks glow faintly in the firelight. And for the first time, you whisper aloud. Not loud enough for anyone to hear, but just loud enough for yourself. It meant something to me. A simple sentence. No one claps. No one punishes. But you feel your heart swell, as if the walls themselves heard you. The thing about silencing is it never truly succeeds. It just changes shape, hides in corners, waits. And now, after all these years, you're beginning to remember that your voice never disappeared. It only took a detour, through your hands, through your memory, through the thousand unsaid things you carried like jars of water, balanced on your head. Not everyone is meant to shout. Some of us are meant to echo. But even echoes start with sound. The tasks become quieter still. You're reassigned again, this time to the night shifts, caring for oil lamps, sweeping dew, damp corridors, feeding animals before sunrise. It's a role for the forgotten, the nearly invisible, and in some strange way, it suits you. Silence is louder at night. The corridors are colder too. You walk through them with a rhythm now, the way musicians trace familiar paths on their instruments. The walls no longer intimidate you. They feel like old company. They remember. They absorb. They do not betray. Some nights you hum. No words, just breath and tone. You light the braziers. Refill the water urns. Collect forgotten offerings. The temple sleeps while you move within it like breath inside a body. The world is quieter than ever. Yet inside, your thoughts bloom louder, richer. There are entire phrases you whisper into empty rooms, pretending they'll float to the gods like ash. In time, you begin carving again, not on wax, not on paper, but on clay. You find discarded pieces behind the granary. Smooth them down. Scratch lines with the tip of a bone, then bury them beneath the olive trees. You think of them as your secret offerings, not to any specific god, but to the part of yourself that still dares to witness. You write questions more than statements. Why was I given a voice if not to use it? What happens to truth when no one hears it? Do words still count if they're never read? They are not masterpieces. They're not even legible to anyone but you. But they are real, more real than the daily greetings you murmur to fellow servants, more real than the nods and bows that pass for conversation here. There's a kind of magic in making your voice physical, even if hidden. It feels like planting something. You don't need it to be seen. You just need it to exist. One night, while refilling oil lamps near the outer shrine, you spot the young girl again, the one who once threw the fig. She's older now, taller. Her eyes still wide, but there's a veil of caution in them that wasn't there before. She recognizes you. You still don't talk, she says, not unkindly. You shrug, smiling. She walks beside you for a while in silence. Then she asks, "Do you ever wish you had?" You hesitate, then nod. She seems to understand something without needing it explained. "I wish I had stayed silent," she says. Sometimes it's safer. You want to tell her that silence isn't always safety. It's just a softer kind of hurt. But the words catch in your throat like stones. Instead, you reach into your pouch and hand her a shard of clay. It's one of your questions. You don't remember which. She studies the markings, runs her thumb over the edge. It's like a prayer, she murmurs. You nod again. That night, she buries it under the almond tree near the gate. Neither of you says anything more, but something changes. You begin carving with more intent, phrases instead of fragments, thoughts instead of echoes. They are still yours, still secret, but now they feel shared, as if part of you has found a mirror even in someone who may never return. And the clay, unlike parchment, will not burn, not easily. Sometimes, in the early hours when the temple is still dark, you imagine future hands unearthing your fragments, piecing them together like a story, not of gods or kings, but of someone who was here, who saw, who thought, who longed. You think about how many lives have passed through these walls, unrecorded, and how many voices were silenced before they ever got to try. Modern people write journals, you've heard, diaries with dates and feelings and secrets. Back then, your diary was shards of earth tucked behind pillars and beneath stone pots. It didn't matter that no one read them. You wrote them anyway. Because sometimes, the most honest thing a soul can do is simply to speak, even when no one is listening, especially then. The nights grow cooler. A silver hush settles over the temple, as if even time is pausing to exhale. Your body moves through routines, but your mind begins to linger elsewhere. On words unspoken, letters unwritten, fragments of yourself buried beneath clay and years. You dream of your hidden writings, not in fear, but in longing. In the dream, a stranger reads them aloud. Their voice is calm, almost reverent. And though you never see their face, you feel something you haven't in a long time heard. When you wake, you're still in the servants' quarters, wrapped in a scratchy linen sheet, heart oddly warm. And for once, you don't shake off the dream like a trick of the mind. You carry it with you, into your day, into the still corners of silence. There's something you've been thinking about more and more, a letter. Not to a god, not to a priest, not even to the child you once were. To someone who will never read it, to the version of yourself who might have spoken up. You begin shaping it in your head, line by line, during the quiet hours between bell tolls and rooster calls. You start with this, I was afraid. Then, not of being wrong, but of being noticed, you pause. Then continue. They taught me to be useful, not memorable, and I tried to follow that. I tried to vanish into good behavior, into obedience. I thought it would protect me, but obedience didn't give me peace. It gave me exile. You write more. When I saw the mistake in the ritual scroll, I hesitated. I could have spoken, but I didn't, and someone else paid the price. That pain never left me, not because I was punished, but because I wasn't. I disappeared inside my own safety. You don't stop. They made my silence look like virtue, but it was fear. And that fear built a wall around me, one I carried everywhere, even when no one else noticed. I don't know if I'll ever be heard. I don't know if these words will last. But I write them now, in my mind and later in clay, because they are mine, because I still exist, even if forgotten. You finish the letter just before dawn. You carve it slowly, piece by piece, into a larger shard of clay you've been saving, the flat side of a broken offering plate. It takes you 3 nights to complete. When you're done, you don't hide it. You place it behind the altar where broken vessels are stored, not where anyone would look, but not buried either, just left. You feel no pride, no fear, just relief, as if something heavy you've been dragging has finally been set down. Days pass, no one notices. Then, one afternoon, while sweeping the herb corridor, you overhear two young initiates speaking. One of the elders found a clay piece with writing. They're calling it a curiosity. They think it's a forgotten ritual. No, the other says. I think someone just needed to be heard. You hold your breath. They don't say your name. They never will. But you smile anyway. It's not recognition you've been longing for. It's resonance. To have your silence speak in a way that someone else understands. That night, you return to the altar room. The clay is gone. In its place, a single dried fig, gently pressed into a bowl of salt. An offering. Modern, day people might dismiss it as coincidence. But you know better. You whisper into the quiet, "Thank you for hearing me." No God's answer, but the silence feels lighter. And you, for the first time in years, feel whole. The air thickens with anticipation. There's talk of an eclipse, a rare one. The temple buzzes with preparation, sacred stones realigned, offerings doubled, rituals rehearsed. You're given a special task for the night of the event, tending to the lamps around the outer shrine during the observance. No one notices your unease, because you've seen something, a detail buried deep within a scroll days earlier. While sweeping the passage behind the high priest's chamber, the ritual script for the eclipse, copied in haste, maybe, was wrong. One invocation glyph had been substituted with its inverse. Instead of invoking clarity and balance, it now called for division. You recognized it. Not just because you could read the shapes, but because you'd made that exact mistake once on a practice shard. The curve was subtle, easy to misdraw, easy to overlook. But you knew what it meant. You felt it like a vibration in your spine. And this time you freeze. Again, not from ignorance, but from the residue of old punishments, old lessons. You tell yourself it's not your place, that they wouldn't listen, that you'll be seen as meddling, that the ritual will go on, glyph or not, and your interference could do more harm than good. So, you stay quiet. Again, the eclipse arrives like a god swallowing the sun. The courtyard darkens into a copper twilight. Drums begin. Chanting follows. You stand by the columns with your oil lamp, watching shadows stretch like fingers. Then it happens. A ripple. Not in the sky, but among the priests. Their voices falter. Confusion spreads. A senior priest stumbles over the next verse. One of the candles sputters, extinguishing at the worst possible moment. It's not catastrophe. It's not divine wrath. It's off, unbalanced, and everyone feels it. The ritual ends with a final chant, unsteady and thin. The high priest's jaw is tight. No one speaks of the flaw, but the air carries it. You sense it in the way servants clean faster afterward, in the way no one meets anyone's gaze. No one is punished, but no one celebrates either. Later that night, you return to your usual corridor. You sit against the wall, your oil lamp beside you. You close your eyes and let the silence settle over you like a veil. You think of all the times you could have spoken, all the times you almost did, and the strange ache of knowing that silence is sometimes a louder betrayal than speech. But you also remember the clay shard that was taken seriously, the girl who called your markings a prayer, the dried fig in salt. Perhaps your voice didn't have to ring from the temple's mouth to matter. Perhaps there were different forms of speech, ones not aimed at authority, but at something softer, closer. You take out another clay shard. This time, you don't write a question. You write a truth. I saw the mistake. I chose silence. I carry both. You don't bury this one. You set it gently by the base of a lamp and walk away. There's something sacred in confession, even when no one hears it, especially then. The temple returns to its rhythms. Offerings resume. Chants echo again with their old, practiced strength. But something inside you has shifted, less like a crack, more like a soft breath against a long, sealed window. You move slower these days, not from age, but from weight, the kind that isn't visible, the kind that gathers over years like dust in corners. And yet, there's light in you, too, a faint ember, the knowledge that your silence is no longer unconscious. It's a choice now. And choice, even in quiet, is a kind of power. One evening, the priestess returns. You see her only from afar, her silhouette passing through the inner gates, her stride slower, her hair streaked with gray. She doesn't look your way, but your breath catches all the same. That night, while refilling lamps, you find something wedged behind the base of a statue, a wax tablet. Familiar, cracked from age. You press your fingers against the lines, remembering the hours spent carving shapes no one was meant to see. This one bears no fresh marks, but it carries memory like perfume carries scent, faint, persistent. It's hers, or yours, or both. You don't take it. You just sit beside it, and you wait. The temple sleeps. The stars are sharp above, the kind that make you wonder whether anything you've ever thought truly disappears, or if it's simply drifting farther out into other lifetimes. You whisper, "I never stopped." And in your mind, she replies, "I knew." The wind shifts. Something, someone, passes through the corridor. You don't turn. Some nights, you imagine what might have been. If you had spoken earlier, if your voice had been welcome, if someone had reached out before you buried it so deep, but not with regret, just with tenderness, because you realize now your silence was not the end of you. It was a phase, a chamber, one of many. Like the rooms in this temple, it held purpose. It protected you, then limited you, then taught you. You think back to the mistakes, the boy who was blamed, the eclipse, the words you etched into clay and placed where no one could see. They were your truths. Some fell on deaf ears. Some, perhaps, reached more than you ever expected. Now, your limbs are tired more quickly. You don't move as you used to. But you still walk the corridors each night. You still care for the lamps. You still know which walls echo and which swallow sound. One night, you sit beneath the almond tree where the girl once buried your shard. It's flowering. Blossoms pale as milk dot the branches like breath caught in midair. You smile. Perhaps words bloom, even after lifetimes. When you return to your quarters, a young servant greets you, one who rarely speaks. He hands you a bowl of dates without explanation, then walks away. There's a message in it, a quiet recognition. Maybe he's seen you trace symbols in the dirt. Maybe he's just watched how you move, how you listen. Maybe he understands the language of silence too. You eat one date. Sweet, sticky, real. That night, you write your final letter, not on clay, not on wax. In your mind, it says, "If I am never remembered, let me still be felt. If my name is not written, let my silence still echo where truth was needed. And if I am born again, may I still carry this voice, not as fear, but as fire." You sleep beside the lamp, its glow warming your shoulder. You don't dream. You don't need to, because for the first time in many seasons, you feel complete. Not because you were heard, but because you finally heard yourself. The final days come with no ceremony. The temple continues its rhythm. Unaware that your steps have grown slower, your breath shallower. You still rise before dawn, tend the lamps, smooth the walkways. But your body leans heavier on the walls now, and each task feels like it takes place in water. Thicker, slower, quieter. There's no announcement, no divine whisper, just the gradual softening of time around you, like the temple itself has started to hum in a lower tone, preparing to absorb you. You know, you feel it in your chest, like a gentle unraveling, not frightening, just inevitable. So you begin to prepare in your own way. You gather your final pieces of clay, some with markings, others still blank. You clean them carefully, line them along the base of your mat, as if organizing thoughts you'll never have time to speak aloud. One night, you leave your quarters early and return to the shrine, where you placed your first written truth. It's still there, surprisingly. Faded, yes, but intact. The gods may not have answered, but they didn't erase you either. You touch the stone beside it and whisper, "I was here." Then you climb the outer steps of the temple, where few servants ever go. From there, the desert spreads endlessly, soft hills of wind-shaped sand, interrupted only by the jagged line of distant date trees. The stars above blink like ancient watchers, neither judging nor guiding, only witnessing. You sit, you let your bones rest, and then you remember something small, something so old it feels like it belonged to a different life. The first time you were told to be quiet, not in the temple. As a child, your mother, tired, scared, shushed you when you asked if the gods had names like yours. You hadn't meant to offend. You just wanted to understand. But the look on her face, a mix of fear and resignation, was the first lesson curiosity is dangerous. And perhaps she wasn't wrong. But she wasn't completely right either, because curiosity is also what brought you here. What taught you how to listen? What let you see mistakes no one else caught? What planted letters in your mind when your tongue was chained by fear? And now, at the edge of this life, you feel no anger, only warmth. Your silence was never perfect. It hurt others. It hurt you. But it also helped someone once, maybe more than once. And even if your name fades from the temple's records, your words, those etched in clay, those whispered in corners, those passed silently from hand to hand, have already taken root somewhere. Maybe in the memory of a child who saw you tending the lamps with care. Maybe in the next servant who learns that language is more than sound. Maybe in another life entirely, as dawn rises, pink and gold along the horizon, you lie back against the cool stone and close your eyes. Your final thought is simple. I was not loud, but I was never nothing. Your breath slows, and in that stillness, before light fully returns, there's a pause, as if the universe itself leans in to listen. And word count 10770, wind down segment I've approx. 300 words and so your story ends, not with thunder, not with triumph, but with the kind of peace that settles only when every echo has had its say. The clay shards remain, perhaps scattered, perhaps buried, but they are there, somewhere, softly holding the shape of a soul that once tried, once wondered, once whispered truth when shouting wasn't safe. And maybe, just maybe, that voice, the one you protected through years of silence, is still with you now. In the present, in the you that hesitates before speaking, in the pause between I'm fine and actually I'm not. In the weight you carry after a conversation where you didn't say what you really meant. It's not your fault. You were taught long ago that speaking costs something, and it did. But so did not speaking. You don't need to fix that all tonight. You don't even need to decide what to do about it tomorrow. You've already begun something braver just by listening, by walking through this memory, this life, this version of yourself that asked to be known. Rest now. You don't have to earn your place in the world by being loud. You've always belonged. You might not remember any of this tomorrow, but the dream will go on.